Running uphill, Senator Rand Paul, known for bucking his Republican Party, now seeks its presidential nomination. An eye for an eye. Will the young man who admits to the Boston Marathon bombing be sentenced to die? Cuban vacation. Americans will soon be able to book lodging on the island nation that was off limits for so long. And tasty Easter celebrations. Father Leo Patalinghug connects food with faith during this octave of Easter. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Easter Tuesday, April 7th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. There is another Republican in the 2016 presidential race tonight. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul declares his candidacy today. His message, combative against Washington politics and even his fellow Republicans. Wyatt Goolsby's at the Capitol tonight with the story. Wyatt?
Brian, today's announcement is just confirmation of what many here on Capitol Hill have been saying forever, that Rand Paul is running for president. But this is the first time the Tea Party favorite is actually testing the waters as a candidate.
I have a message. A message that is loud and clear and does not mince words. We've come to take our country back.
And with that, Rand Paul becomes the second Republican to officially enter the 2016 presidential race. Leading a rally from his home state of Kentucky, Paul vowed to return the country to the principles of liberty and limited government. Paul is a fierce critic of Washington, where in his first term as a senator has gained some support from libertarians and others outside the GOP establishment.
Rand Paul is well positioned to be that insurgent candidate.
David Bowes, who has studied libertarianism, says in many ways Rand Paul's policies match up with the libertarian view: lower taxes, less government regulation, and a smaller U.S. military overseas.
There's a couple of big issues that libertarians often point out. A lot of libertarians disagree with him. He's pro-life. Many libertarians are pro-choice. He's also not in favor of same-sex marriage. Most libertarians are.
Paul backed legislation to ban abortion, but has upset pro-lifers by saying the U.S. is too divided to change federal abortion laws. What's unclear is how much support Paul can muster.
Rand Paul enters the race with a giant bullseye on the back. He is not a popular figure inside the foreign policy establishment of the Republican Party. His domestic politics fall outside of the RNC platform in some cases.
Paul has urged GOP leaders to focus less on gay marriage and abortion as a way to help the party grow.
Senator Paul starts his campaign in his home state of Kentucky. From here, he'll swing through New Hampshire, South Carolina, Iowa, and Nevada, critical first states in the primaries. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby at the Capitol, thank you. And former President Bill Clinton says he plans to be a backstage advisor in his wife's presidential campaign. The former president says he'll work to focus on the Clinton Foundation until much closer to the election itself. Hillary Clinton is expected to officially enter the presidential race very soon. If she's elected, Bill Clinton says he will, quote, have to assess what she wants me to do. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Jurors deliberate in the Boston Marathon bombing trial, almost 2 years after twin bombs killed 3 people and wounded more than 260. If convicted, Johar Tsarnaev would face the death penalty. Jason Calvi joins us now with the story.
Ryan, the judge sent the jurors home today after 7 hours of deliberations. The accused 21-year-old faces 30 different charges, including setting off weapons of mass destruction. Johar Tsarnaev's attorneys say he stands ready to be held accountable for his actions. In her closing argument, defense attorney Judy Clark told jurors there's no excuse for the destruction and suffering. The bombing at the finish line of the Boston Marathon was almost 2 years ago. But Tsarnaev's attorney says it never would have happened if not for Tsarnaev's older brother, Tamerlan, who was killed after the bombing. Prosecutors painted a different picture. They say Tamerlan and Johar acted as partners as they carried out the bombings. It killed 8-year-old Martin Richard, Crystal Campbell, and Lingzi Liu, and injured more than 260, followed by the murder of MIT officer Sean Collier, a carjacking, a robbery, and a firefight with police.
He was relatively non-reactive until Al Chaknavati, who did the closing, walked towards the table and pointed to him. He got a little animated after that. He was fidgeting, moving his hands around. I thought that he might actually say something.
Prosecutors asked the jury to hold Tsarnaev accountable and consider the death penalty. They point to the images of him minutes before the explosions, and they describe him as entirely untroubled by what he's about to do. Was Dzhokhar Tsarnaev a partner in terror, or was he brainwashed by an older brother? That's now up to a jury to decide. And if Tsarnaev is convicted, the jury will then begin hearing evidence on whether he should get life in prison or a death sentence. The bishops of Massachusetts released a statement highlighting the church's teaching, saying the need for executions are rare, if practically non-existent in modern times. I spoke to their public policy director, and here's what he said.
If society can be assured that the defendant in this case, Tsarnaev in this case, can be neutralized and cannot do this damage again, the death penalty should not be what's imposed, because all life is precious and a gift from God.
The Massachusetts Catholic Conference tells us the bombing was horrible, and they're not trying to ignore the pain. The jury is made up of 5 men and 7 women, among them a government employee, a cake artist, and Brian, a single mother.
All right, Jason Calvi, thank you. A first-in-the-nation abortion law is now law in Kansas. The ban is on second trimester abortions, which actually dismember an unborn child. Republican Governor Sam Brownback signed the bill this morning. The new law would take effect July 1st after a public signing April 28th. 2 pro-abortion groups say they will challenge that law in court. Kansas Right to Life tells us, we are thrilled to be the first in the nation to pass this law. We encourage other states to follow suit. Several other states are considering similar legislation. Saudi-led coalition jets bombed a military installation in southern Yemen today. Local tribes continue to battle Shiite rebels and their allies. The fighting comes as the United Nations warns more than 100,000 people have fled their homes in Yemen. The UN also says at least 74 children have been killed since the fighting between Yemeni rivals intensified 2 weeks ago. Humanitarian groups say they are running out of supplies. They're asking for a break in the fighting to allow medical teams and supplies to arrive in the country. The Saudi-led campaign has failed to stop the Houthis' advance on Yemen's second largest city. A single father and his 7 children are dead from possible carbon monoxide poisoning. The bodies of Rodney Todd and his 2 sons and 5 daughters were found by police in their Maryland home yesterday. A generator in the kitchen with no gasoline left suggests they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. The electricity to the home had been shut off because of unpaid bills. A concerned coworker called police after Todd hadn't been seen for days.
Easter holiday, thought maybe he was going with his kids out of town to his parents' house or somewhere. But when I didn't, I just felt that something was wrong, that he didn't report to work and nobody could contact him.
Police say foul play is not suspected. The cause of the death is being investigated. Religious leaders gathered for an Easter prayer breakfast at the White House this morning. President Obama mixed reflection with a joking poke at his critics.
On Easter, I do reflect on the fact that as a Christian, I am supposed to love. And I have to say that sometimes when I listen to less than loving expressions by Christians, I get concerned. But that's a topic for another day.
The president says he prays that everyone live up to Christ's example and be worthy of God's blessings. He thanked Christian leaders for traveling to Washington from across the country after their busy Holy Week. Pope Francis has been increasingly vocal about the fate of Christians who are targeted by Islamic extremists in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Coming into this Easter week, the Holy Father begged the world not to turn away from, quote, our martyrs of today. Alan Holdren is joining us from Rome tonight. And Alan, what is the Vatican doing for persecuted Christians?
Well, the Vatican, especially the Pope, have spoken out many times against the violence that is really putting Christians in a difficult situation throughout the Middle East. Concretely, last week, Pope Francis sent a special envoy to Iraq to celebrate Holy Week and especially Easter with refugees in the different camps around Mosul, Erbil. This is a city that has received more than 100,000 Christians and others in recent months, since August of last year in particular. Now, the Pope's envoy brought special Easter cakes this time in the name of the Pope. Last August, he brought $1 million.
All right, also, this is a very quiet week there in the Vatican, being Easter week, the octave of Easter. Do you know what's next on the Pope's schedule?
Yes, this week, as you said, he has a quiet week. He's not celebrating his regular morning Mass, nothing on the schedule at all at this point, until Saturday, where he's going to be celebrating what they call Vespers. It's first Vespers, the evening prayer in St. Peter's Basilica, this on the eve of Divine Mercy Sunday, which is so important in the Church, especially on the eve of the Year of Mercy, which on Sunday, the Pope will be what they call publishing a papal bull ahead of that Year of Mercy to give it an official announcement. It's not going to start until December. The Pope will also be in St. Peter's Basilica celebrating a Mass in the Armenian Catholic Rite with many from the Armenian community on the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide.
This octave of Easter, the greatest celebration in the church calendar. Give us a sense of the Easter celebrations there in Italy and specifically in Rome.
Well, they really take it to heart here. Here in the Mediterranean, specifically Spain and Italy, in every town, every place, they have just enormous celebrations, especially because the weather is changing. It's really spring here. You could see it in St. Peter's Basilica in St. Peter's Square on Sunday. All of the flowers out there, which ironically came from the Netherlands, further north. But it's just a really beautiful celebration that people live in the streets. And in their homes, they eat lamb and they eat these enormous chocolate Easter eggs. It's really a special celebration. And one thing that you hear so often here on the streets of Rome is that people's favorite holiday of the year is Easter.
And it is indeed a season, goes for 50 days. Alan Holdren joining us from Rome tonight. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up, blackout in the nation's capital, and Cuba opens its doors to American tourists. From the first reading for this Easter Tuesday, Colossians 3 verses 1 and 2. If you have risen with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Mind the things that are above. Hallelujah. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, the nation's capital went dark for part of today. The White House, the State Department, the U.S. Capitol were all affected by power outages. The outages caused by a power plant explosion. Some were brief, others were longer. Buildings, including some Smithsonian museums, were evacuated. The local utility company is investigating. The White House says there is no known link to terrorism. Ferguson, Missouri voters pick a new city council today. This election comes after months of tension following the 2014 police shooting of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Several city officials resigned after a Justice Department investigation found racial bias and racial profiling. 3 of the council's 6 seats are contested today. The lone African-American council member is not up for re-election this year. Well, a psychologist says the retracted Rolling Stones article about a university gang rape is a sex assault survivor's worst nightmare.
The number one reason that sex assault survivors do not come forward is a fear that they will not be believed. That's the number one reason. So to watch it play out on such a huge national stage just can reinforce this idea that I'm not going to be taken seriously, nothing's going to happen, and I'm going to be made to look bad in this.
On Sunday, Rolling Stone retracted an article it published in November called "A Rape on Campus." A University of Virginia fraternity house was implicated in a vicious gang rape. The retraction followed a scathing report from the Columbia Journalism School on the magazine's shoddy reporting and editing. The fraternity announced it will pursue all available legal action against Rolling Stone, calling the story defamatory and reckless. The American healthcare worker flown from West Africa to the U.S. for Ebola treatment last month is now upgraded to good condition. The patient contracted the deadly virus while volunteering in Sierra Leone. He was in critical condition at one time, but is continuing to improve at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. Health officials have been monitoring about 40 other Americans who have been in contact with the infected patient. None had tested positive for Ebola by late last week. American travelers will soon be able to book lodging in Cuba. It's the most significant U.S. business expansion to Cuba since last year's declaration of détente with the United States. Susie Pinto reports.
Vacation in Cuba. Words once thought unlikely for Americans may soon become reality. This week, Airbnb, an American company that helps people rent homes or rooms in homes for vacation, is starting operation in the island nation. Interest in tourism has grown since President Barack Obama announced an effort to normalize relations with the communist nation in December.
But change is going to come to Cuba. It has to.
Airbnb will hope to tap into a growing tourism market, but will face challenges. A major one being much of the country still does not have access to the internet.
I don't think there'd be a future. The businesses won't prosper. We definitely would need internet connection to modify and check.
The Cuban government says it's expanding the number of internet cafes, but that's expensive and tough for business owners to use. Still, some Cuban brokers are hopeful U.S. curiosity in Cuba will overcome the barriers.
Yes, I think so, because we Cubans think the American people are also anxious to get to know Cuban culture because of so many years of restrictions. So yes, I think there will be great influence from the American people who want to know the history of Cuba in general.
Airbnb says it's just started the process of screening participants and will post 200 rentals initially on its website. Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Susie. The Duke Blue Devils are now 5-time national champions. Duke beat the Wisconsin Badgers, who had knocked off previously undefeated Kentucky. The Blue Devils outscored the Badgers 14 points in the final 13 minutes of the game for a comeback victory. Tonight's women's finals is a rematch from last year, UConn taking on Notre Dame. Up next, it's no longer a question of where's the beef, but more like where's the butchers? And this Flat Francis character is popping up all over social media. We'll tell you why. On this 5th day of the Divine Mercy Novena, we pray for the souls of those who have separated themselves from the Church. Of course, Divine Mercy Sunday is this coming Sunday. Thank you for joining us on this Easter Tuesday. I'm Brian Patrick. It's great to have Father Leo Patalinghug with us, the host of EWTN's Savoring Our Faith. You can find him online at Grace Before Meals. You do a great job of connecting food and faith. So in this Easter season, in the Gospels, we hear about the risen Jesus asking the apostles, do you have any food? And then he eats it in front of them. On another occasion, he grills fish for them.
That's right.
On the seashore. So connect food and faith for us during this Easter season.
Here's where I think Jesus is partly Filipino, because he had fish for breakfast.
That's right.
But the fish itself is a theological reality. The word in Greek, ichthus, is an acronym for the phrase Jesus Christus huios theos soter, which is Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. And the actual eating of it shows that the physical resurrection is a tangible reality. It's not a spiritual resurrection as some of the early heretics would consider, but it's a physicality. In other words, our God incarnately wants us to be not reincarnated, but brought up to heaven, body and soul.
So food makes us real.
Yeah,
real
absolutely.
and human. Tell us about some of the wonderful cultural experiences throughout the Easter season that you're aware of.
Well, I think it's the Easter celebration, which lasts longer than our fasting celebration.
It does, 50 days.
Reminds us that we have as Catholics, no dietary restrictions. We only have dietary disciplines, all things in moderation. And the Easter egg itself, while its traditions are kind of ambiguous, we know that they were decorated to show the beauty of life on the inside is more incredible than the decorations on the outside. The Lamb of God suppers, and then the Polish tradition of blessing the Easter baskets, which are always great for me because we always told people, bring the baskets to the church and leave a little for the priest, is what we would say. And it was just a reminder that the goodness, the bounty, the providence of God, that land flowing with milk and honey, it's even more incredible at the resurrection.
Your ministry is unique, and it's so beautiful in the sense that it really brings this idea of eating and good food right into the middle of our faith.
Sure.
Certainly, that could help us in terms of our family life, don't you think? But we're getting back to more meals together and celebrating with food.
Well, I hope so. Food is cooking it and sharing it is the one thing that makes us unique. We have this tangible connection to God who wants to feed his human family. And when we participate in that act, keeping God in mind, we can actually become saints just by providing food because we see Christ's hunger in them, and it is Christ in us that feeds them. That's what made Mother Teresa and all of those apostolates that fed the poor. They're saints for that reason.
Beautiful message. Father Leo Patalinghug. You can watch him on EWTN's Savoring Our Faith. What's your website?
GraceBeforeMeals.com.
Thanks for joining us, Father. Happy Easter.
Thanks.
We're going to stay on the food theme, and with demand for locally produced beef surging, the skill of butchering is becoming rare. Catherine Szeltner reports on this tender topic for restaurant owners.
Sawing, cutting, lifting. Butchery requires muscles and stamina.
The aches and pains, there's a lot of them. You're carrying 150 to 200 pound hindquarters and front quarters, which I've done through the years, and I've had one hip replaced and now I need another one replaced.
Kent Weiss has been a butcher for 38 years. When he retires, his almost 150-year-old family business will likely close. Not from lack of demand, but because he has no one to take over the grueling work.
The small walkers and the small packing plants are going to have to start recruiting more younger people, and the state's probably going to have to get involved.
Across the country, thousands of butchers are approaching retirement age, just as demand for locally produced beef is surging. One Wisconsin restaurant owner is taking matters into his own hands.
We value the snout, the tongue, the liver as much as we value the pork tenderloin and the pork loin.
Dave Swanson buys full animals from local farmers, butchers them, and then sells the meat to other area restaurants. He recently dished up a beef fat-fried polenta dish because they had 400 pounds extra.
So if we can sell, 6 dishes with a pig's tail in it at $6, well, that then, equates to money that we can use to lower the price of what it costs us to bring that pork chop in.
Swanson also works with cooks from other restaurants to teach them how to butcher meat, a skill he says chefs will need if more butcher shops close.
I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to take an animal and break it down respectfully.
Back in Iowa, Weiss is making do for now.
I can last another probably 5, 6, maybe 10 years, and then we'll see what happens.
An ancient trade trying to find its way in modern times. Experts say locally produced grass-fed beef is high in vitamins, low in fat, and has more antioxidants than factory-farmed beef. So, Brian, it doesn't look like the restaurant's need for butchers will die out anytime soon.
Sounds like there's a lot at stake, Catherine. Thank you. Well, his name is Flat Francis. Maybe you've seen people tweeting pictures of themselves with this cartoon pope that really doesn't resemble Francis that much. It's part of a campaign to welcome the Holy Father to the U.S. From Texas to Alaska and in between, it's all over Twitter, people posing with the Pope. The idea is similar to the children's story Flat Stanley. The campaign is the brainchild of Catholic Extension, a national fundraising organization. You can get your own cutout from flatfrancis.org. You take your picture with it, then post the photo with the hashtag FlatFrancis. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. And Alan mentioned earlier the beautiful flowers at St. Peter's Basilica in the St. Peter's Square for the Easter celebration. So let's enjoy some of those as we say goodnight and God bless you.